Welcome, everybody. I'm glad it's nice turnout here this morning. I don't know about any of you guys, but it was sort of a hockey rink driving in here this morning. So it's actually a good morning to sit around and talk about plants. So we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen with the show. Before I completely forget, though, I wanted to let you know that 2 weeks from today, we have a webinar. We're scheduling a webinar to talk about display programs. I know many of you in the audience have signed up for either one or many of our display for pay programs. We want to go over those things, talk about the things that we're going to try to do this year to make those programs succeed so that you can reach your goal, and talk about really the philosophy of why we're doing these things. So that's going to be on Wednesday, February 22nd. You'll see some emails coming around about that. But let me do the thing here that always seems to be the thought. Oh, look at that! I can actually share a screen. I'm getting pretty good at this, I gotta say. So. And there we go. So just one other thing, as Allison said, I'm going to try to monitor the chat box if I can. However, I'm going to say that it's quite possible Allison will monitor this throughout, and we'll have questions at the end. But if there's particular questions, Allison will also more than likely intervene here and actually just talk about those questions, see if I can get an answer. So having gone through all the preliminaries, let's get down and start talking about these wonderful plants. So we're going to start off with woodies. And we'll start off with which I think is a great tree that a lot of people just don't know about. So, and that is Acer rubrum Armstrong Gold. This is the first year we're carrying this. Obviously, why are we carrying this plant? Well, as many of you know, the fact of the matter is that columnar plants have been huge. And this is just another columnar plant that has a lot going on for it, but also these columnar trees have great need in that they fill spaces in the landscape. As you know from your own yards, sometimes you put a tree in an area and it's good for a little while, but then it outgrows the area, especially width-wise. And this is why Armstrong Gold, I think, is one of the better plants. So nice columnar form, since it's an Acer rubrum. It's very tolerant of rougher areas. Again, you can see one of these the images is situated in a parking lot, so they can take some abuse and still come out swinging. It's a great tree for near the road. And the color is spectacular, as it is with all Acer rubrums, as we know. So what I would say is that good tree for the yard, good tree for narrow spaces, good tree for border plantings, for a lot of different situations in the landscape. I'm a little distracted here because I'm looking at some of the messages saying that the chat is disabled. I'm sure that we'll want to take a look at that, Allison. But so I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but that's one of the notes I'm seeing. So
yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, Tim. I'm as well. I think because you're the host, you have to enable that possibly.
Well, let me see how I would, geez, I mean, I was able to, oh, I see Mary Jo has said that the Q&A is working now. So thank you for that feedback, because, I thought it was great that I could actually share my screen. I mean, asking me to enable the chat is probably going a little too far for me technically. So thanks for that, Mary Jo.
So
So
if you
that
have
is,
questions throughout the process, you can type them into the question and answer section and we'll respond.
all right. So to extend this theme a little bit, this is Betchlove Parkland Pillar. Now, this was an introduction from 2022, but I think a lot of people just aren't aware of how great this plant is. So this is ultra narrow, beautiful white bark, very, very tolerant, as you can see, zone 3 hardy, drought tolerant, perfect for a border. And this plant, you know, we went big on this plant last year, probably. I'll have to say we probably went big without realizing we were going to go big. And all of a sudden last spring we had, you know, we had these plants, we had 750 of these Parkland pillars on the ground. And of course we're saying, oh boy, we're going to have trouble selling this and all that. And of course we ended up selling the majority of these plants last year. 750 for a tree is a fair amount of trees to go through here. But what I would say is that it's a birch, which is really a great plant and very, you know, obviously a great Northeast plant. And just that absolute narrowness of this spoke to people. So again, we love this plant. We've got, not sure we have as many as last year, but we have a lot still available. And this is a plant that I think is an exceptional landscape plant. And I think easily used in many spots in the landscape. There's a question from Heidi. Can these street tree columnars be grown with 5-foot clear height for medians and crosswalks? Well, yeah, I would say, I think the question that you're asking is that can you limb this up so that you can have a better sight line? You probably can if you're using it for something like that. And as far as insect and disease in Parkland pillar, it is like all birches, I think has, well, this one is a platyphyllum, so it does have some disease resistance, but birches are birches, but this is one of the more tolerant ones is what I would say. Another plant that we introduced last year that a lot of people don't know about, this is Cephalanthus crimson comets. And for you guys, there's going to be a theme going through here. You're going to see a lot about pollinators in this talk. And the reason we're doing that is because a lot of people a lot of you out there at garden centers are fielding a lot of questions about native plants and pollinators. And that's a great thing. It's a great opportunity for us in this field to show that we are not just growing for beautification, but also growing to support the environment, support pollinators, that kind of thing. So Cephalanthus is one of the best native plants out there. This is a selection, naturally occurring selection of Cephalanthus. And what we like about it is its incredible fall red color, which includes the foliage. It's the best fall color we've seen on really any of our Cephalanthus that we're growing, but that fruit is just outstanding with that red color. It gets really redder than almost every other Cephalanthus that we've seen. So what's great about Cephalanthus? Well, grows in wet areas, which is perfect. It's very unique. You can see that the flower off to the right in this slide is very unique, sort of Sputnik-like. It's a great adjective that we don't get to use in plants, Sputnik-like. I sort of like that. Of course, it's aging me a little bit because there's probably a lot of young people that are on this that really aren't so sure what Sputnik means. So I'll let you look that up. But the other part of it, in flower, very attractive to pollinators of all sorts. In seed, it's really a perfect native bird plant. They love the seed from the mature fruit. It's a big plant. I'm not going to lie to you. These are large plants, and they have their place in the landscape. And you know, they're kind of out in the yard. Again, moist areas, rain gardens, perfect spot for that kind of plant. But perfect for cover. This is this is really kind of one of those pollinator plants, if you will, that is really just, it's got it all going on. So this is Cephalanthus crimson comets.
Tim, before we move on to the next one, do you know anything about the disease resistance of the Parkland pillar and against like the birch borer resistance?
Birch borer, I'm not, I'll be the first one to say that I will have to look up and see that. Again, as I was saying before, it's a platyphyllum, which because of that kind of cross, it does have some disease resistance, but I'll be the first one to say on birches, there's hard to find anything that's bulletproof out there.
I did quickly search it up on the First Editions website, and it doesn't really say anything about it on there. So,
yeah, I would say that there's that there either isn't anything that's proved that's super improved on it. We obviously here growing it, we just planted one in the landscape here this year. And so we don't really have a track record yet to see what we would have. And it's a great question. Also, we'll see what we can find out for more information on that. And Kevin's asking what size container are the trees being offered. The ones that we the Acer was a 7 and a 15, and I believe that the birch is only a 7-gallon, Kevin. So let's talk about deer villas here. Deer villas are kind of a Midwest plant. That's where they're used the heaviest, and I have to say that they are right in using this plant is what it comes down to. We in the East are still getting acquainted with deer villas, but let me tell you, they are great plants for the landscape. And why do I say that? Well, they're incredibly easy to take care of. They're exceedingly tolerant of poor soil areas. You know, I'll illustrate that in a little bit for something that we've done with them here on the farm. They really have great foliage. They have small flowers, but their ability to attract pollinators and to bring life to a garden is really underestimated by people, especially people in the East. You guys in the Midwest have probably seen all that, but we're just learning about these plants here on the East Coast. So this particular one, Deer Villa Kodiak Fresh, is a new selection from Proven Winners. And what this has is really kind of a really sort of a yellowish green new foliage on it that really is attractive. As you know, with lots of deer villas, and you're going to see another one beyond this that we have that we're going to have in this program. They are really a great plant for color, for foliage color. So when they bloom, it's great butterfly and hummingbird attractor. They're drought tolerant, they're bee supportive, and they are not plants that are going to outgrow an area. So these are plants that speak well to putting in the landscape. I was going to illustrate, we grow not this particular variety, but we have a deer villa in a landscape. It's basically in a screen area. It's a lower plant, a screen area, and it's basically growing in almost a waste soil area. And some of the other plants that we put in there, the evergreens we put in there, probably not doing as well, but this plant is just like the star of the show in this area. Tolerates that poor, droughty, sandy soil extra well, and it's an attractive plant throughout the growing season. This particular honeysuckle is not invasive. I know people look at that name and get all worried about the name honeysuckle. This is not a Lonicera. This is deer villa, and so not an issue for invasiveness. So this is Kodiak Fresh, and this is deer villa ruby wren. Another type of another type of deer villa that's in our American Beauties program. why did we put this in? A great foliage color, a good bloomer, all the great things that we talked about with Deer Villa, the previous Deer Villa right here. Great for fall color, great for attracting birds like all Deer Villa, great cover. These are definitely excellent plants for the landscape that are underused in the east. So this is Deer Villa Ruby Wren. I see a question, will Deer Villa retain their bright foliage in a shady area? And in full shade, no, they'll have different color. If they're getting 6 hours of sun, they'll probably have very corresponding color to sun, to a complete sun area, but in full shade, they will survive because they are survivors. But a lot of those great colors and some of those characteristics would probably be muted in a shade area. So this is Deer Villa Ruby Wren. So hibiscus, let's talk about hibiscus. You know, proven winners, and this is a proven winners selection, has sort of dominated a lot of the hibiscus, certainly the ones that we grow. A lot of the older varieties, you know, the old standbys like Minerva and let's say Lucy, Ardens, all those things have sort of become a thing of the past here at Pride's Corner, and for good reason. Now, this hibiscus dark lavender chiffon, many of you know that you've been buying hibiscus lavender chiffon through the years. So what's really the big difference? Why are we having both plants? Well, I will tell you, we're having both plants because we're discontinuing lavender chiffon, and there's a little bit of carryover. But the difference is of two strong things about this plant that we really like. One, the color is far less washed out and far more vibrant than the color on lavender chiffon. It's really just a more attractive color, really shows up in the landscape well without being overbearing. The other part that we really like about this is that this is considered, even though it shows that it's got more petals than a true single like Minerva, but it still is a single type of hibiscus, Rosa Sharon, and with all those, they tend to be big seed producers. And lavender chiffon, I can tell you, we can show you out in the nursery at times where we've had hibiscus growing, and how in certain areas right around where they were growing that there's seedlings coming up. The great thing about dark lavender, it produces very few seeds, much less than straight lavender chiffon. So we're kind of fired up about this variety. Great bloomer. Obviously, like all Rosa Sharon, attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. They're very tolerant plants, but we love the color, and we love the fact that it's not a seed producer, which speaks well to dark chiffon. So here we have another one, which would be considered a true double. This is French Cabaret Purple. This is part of the first editions program, and I love these cabarets. We have a red one. There's a red one that was introduced a couple of years ago. There's a light pink one that's in this selection, and this purple lavender is really nice. What I would say is that this is probably the closest flower form, if you will, to the old Ardens out there for all you old timers that remember that double flower. But what is the difference? Well, the difference is this is a much heavier bloomer than that plant is. It's almost a carnation-like flower, a sizable flower, which is really good. It's got a darkness to it also that can be comparative to the dark lavender chiffon that we just talked about. Very vigorous, again, tolerant, salt tolerant, like all hibiscus. I think this is one of those great plants. I love this Cabernet or Cabaret series here. So like I said, it's this purple one, it's a red one, it's a light pink one. And if you haven't tried these, then I think it's a good plant for you to try. And Yes, I see Chris talking about Syriacus and the double flowers that impede pollinators and all that. Double flowers do that. Has there been any study that I have seen on that about impeding that? No, I haven't seen a study on that. I would say that you raise a great point, but I don't have really the answers on that for you. Well, let's talk about pollinator attracting plants and talk a little bit about mop heads versus lace cap hydrangea. So, one of the biggest, I'll start off by saying one of the biggest um, native hydrangea that you're going to find out there obviously is Annabelle. It's everywhere. It's a staple plant for northern landscapes from really the East Coast out well past the Midwest. Just a really good plant that's kind of captured the market, as we know. And it's considered a native plant, but it's not really the best flower for trying to support pollinators because they really don't. It's the fertile flowers, those little flowers in the center there that you see in this lace cap that are really the kinds of things that support pollinators. And in your own yard, you can go out and see this. If you go out into your yard and you are growing lace caps, which I would recommend that you should for all the right reasons. I mean, I know people are really taken by mop head flowers. That is understandable, but there's a lot to be written about and a lot of great landscape value that comes from these from lace cap flowers. The most important of which is their ability to support pollinators. And if you go to a mop head flower and you have a lace cap growing right next to it, the bee activity on that lace cap flower is just immense. Whereas they'll occasionally land on the mop head flowers, and you can see that right away when you're in the landscape. It's really just a great demonstration about what plants like pinky pollen ring bring to the landscape. So this is an introduction into our American Beauties native plants. And even just in a year's time, this plant has become immensely popular with our customers. And there's a reason for that. Big flowers, that pollinator activity, stiff stems, really, really dark foliage. It really looks like a sturdy, great plant. It's very dependable for blooming. Tolerates partial shade well, as we know, like a lot of hydrangea will. It's perfect for naturalizing along wood lines, that kind of thing. We're really high on this plant. This is hydrangea pinky pollen ring. And there's sort of a theme because you're going to look at some of the next plants and say, wow, there's a lot of lace caps here. So let's move on and talk about Invincibelle Sublime.
First, Tim, before you talk about the other hydrangeas, Mary Ann just had a quick question about the hibiscus Cabernet series, and those are all sterile. She asked if they had a few seeds. They're actually being listed as completely sterile. So all that the French Cabernet series.
Thanks, appreciate that. And Karen, thanks for chiming in there about Haas Halo and its comparison to pinky pollen ring. Haas Halo is a great plant. There's no doubt about it. If I'm comparing the two, and then we'll move on to Sublime, but if I'm comparing the two, what I like more about pinky pollen ring is the deepness of the foliage color and the stiffness of the stems. It looks like a more robust plant, but that's taking nothing away from Haas Halo, which we are growing here and also feel like is an excellent plant for the landscape. So hydrangea Invincibelle Sublime, again, another good pollinator plant. What distinguishes this plant? Well, the foliage is not as dark, but the stems are just as stiff. The darker pink color on those those fertile flowers really stands out, especially when compared to the sterile flowers on the outside. I love the color of the stems. It's subtle, but that deeper color to the stems really says a lot to it. You know, it's a longer stem plant. It's a little bit bigger profile plant also. So it's a, you know, it's going to be a plant that's going to have some bulk in the landscape. And so I like it as a cut flower, perfect for mass planting. Again, pollinator friendly. You'll see that going right through all these lace cap hydrangeas. So this is Invincibel Sublime and a new proven winners plant. Well, here's a serrata here, and there's a reason why I have this on here. You know, I'd be the first person to say that the world has the world feels like it's a hydrangea world at this point, doesn't it? It seems like there's an incredible amount of different types of hydrangea on the market. So it's hard to distinguish them at some point. And so I feel the need that we have to distinguish some of the better ones out there. So let's talk about hydrangea serrata pink dynamo. Well, it's a serrata type, which automatically makes it a little more bud hardy. Now, I know it says zone 5 through 9. Most serratas are pretty dependable to 4 for blooming. I think the testing is still going on in this. The zone 5 is a safe place to be. There's no doubt about it. But what are some of the things that are great about this plant? Its compactness is wonderful. The amount of blooms that it puts out is great. Again, it's another lace cap type. The dark foliage, it really retains that dark foliage a good portion of the season. I really like that about it. It reblooms very well, and it's very compact. Now, this is a Bloomin' Easy plant. I think you know, Bloomin' Easy is a younger program. We like a lot of the plants that are in Bloomin' Easy and have been a great supporter of this program. I think that this is really one of the best of these of the Bloomin' Easy plants. Again, good in sun, tolerates partial shade like all hydrangeas will, and love that form. You're going to find that there's probably going to be a lot of advertising out this year about this plant. That's really the other reason I wanted to bring it to your attention, because there may be people coming in and asking for this plant, because this is going to be the poster child for Bloomin' Easy and the amount of publicity that they're going to put out about that. So this is hydrangea serrata pink dynamo. One question from Vilma. Yes, if you put in our soils in the Northeast, this is going to be a much more purpley mauve color than what is shown in this picture. This is kind of a picture from I would say a more alkaline soil. I see another question from Katie about her serratas never reblooming. That's a great question. We have found that they rebloom pretty well here, but I have not. I do not have this plant in particular, nor do I have a serrata in my landscape. I really have to make sure I get on top of that, I guess, so I can tell you that. But in a container for us, with and the fact that we are pruning these plants at a particular point in the year, we are always getting rebloom on these. So that's probably the best way I could answer that question, Katie. So this may be 2023's biggest introduction of the year for hydrangea. This is hydrangea Endless Summer Pop Star. So obviously in the Endless Summer program, and look at that, it's a lace cap. It seems like there's a theme here. So what do we like about this plant? This plant just wants to bloom and bloom and bloom. You know what we noticed when we first started the liners that kind of worried us, to be honest with you, was the fact that we planted them and we'd have a 3-inch liner that was barely just branching and all of a sudden be budding. That for people that want to grow the plants and get to them to size for you guys to sell, that's kind of a big red flag for us. And that just goes to show how much it wants to bloom. Now we overcame that. We got beautiful plants on the nursery right now that are ready to come out to you guys this spring. But this plant is going to continue to bloom throughout the seasons. Just really, the blooming firepower is amazing. It's incredibly dense and full. This is not a plant that's going to be well, let's compare it to the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to endless summer plants, and that would be the original endless summer, which tends to be a big tends to be a little bit floppy, as we know, but it's a pretty aggressive growing, big, almost sort of open plant. This is completely the opposite of that. As you can see, really dark foliage, really compact. And what I can tell you is the bloom power is unmatched. And yes, you get the bonus, of course, since it is a lace cap flower, you're going to see pollinator activity on that. So the darker the pH, obviously, the better the blue color. But we really like this plant. I'm definitely going to plant this in my yard this year to look at it, because if you're seeing it on the nursery, you're going to be taken by it. So this is Hydrangea Endless Summer Pop Star, and I will tell you that the folks at Endless Summer will be pulling out all the stops this year to publicize this new variety. So we're sort of finally off of the lace caps, and so let's talk about Skyview here. This is a new selection from Proven Winners, as you can see, and they have been introducing really a series of, I think, incredible bloomers. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's various colors and all that, but instead of talking about these plants as rebloomers, they're talking about these plants as constant bloomers. They continue all season to set buds, and this plant is no exception. And what we like about this plant is that, let's look at that flower color. And again, we're talking about the Northeast here, or the East Coast, where there's plenty of acid soils. When people see that blue, that's kind of the blue that they want. We sort of call that money blue, if you will. It's what everybody in the world wants from a blue hydrangea. So we look at that, and it's not purple, it's not mauve, it's not red, it's not pink. It's that blue color, that New England blue color that people seem to gravitate to. When you add that to the fact of that color and the amount of rebloom that happens on a plant that's not super compact, but is not as big and open as, let's say, an endless summer, we think that this is a real good landscape plant. So good disease resistance. Obviously, the more intense color is going to come from more acidic soil. There's no doubt about it. But this, we're really fired up about this plant. Again, this is going to be really promoted heavily by Proven Winners this year, and for good reason. It's really a good plant. I see a question from Megan about Pop Star. It's supposed to be more cold hardy than traditional endless summer, and that would be a resounding yes, Megan. This is definitely a good plant for colder areas. You can see that I believe it says zone 4 on it, and it will tolerate that well, and the buds are hardy in that area also. Mary Ann is asking, can Let's Dance take sun? Absolutely. They'll take full sun, they'll take partial shade, and they'll do fine in those landscape areas. What the hydrangeas don't love is in a full sun is really droughty soils. That will be an issue, but good moist, fairly well drained, but moister soil, definitely Let's Dance series plants will do well there. So this is Hydrangea Let's Dance Skyview. So Ariba here is a plant that that we introduced last year. And of course, you know, I know again, speaking to hydrangea macrophyllus and sometimes the fatigue that's out there with those plants, this was a plant that our sales team kind of marginalized also, because it was just another, but yeah, it was supposed to be a great bloomer, blah, blah, blah. And then we went out and saw this plant on the nursery last summer. And I'll have to, I don't think there was anybody on our sales team that just didn't fall in love immediately with this plant. So why is that? Well, it's not that money blue that we talked about, but it's really a great blue, and the flowers are huge. The plant itself are very dense, nice foliage on it, but the flower show with the package, that compact package, was just amazing. This was one of those hydrangea that we looked at, and we published a number of pictures of that people really turned around looking at this plant. Again, it's one of the Let's Dance series. They're making them into, again, what I would call that constant bloom type of thing. But this plant really surprised us. And if you didn't try this plant, you definitely should give it a chance. This is just what we feel is just shows off the new Let's Dance genetic focus as good as any of them. So this is hydrangea Let's Dance Ariba. So let's move on to the other half of hydrangea, and that is paniculatas. Now, this again was a 2022 introduction that a lot of people passed over with that fatigue on certainly that happens with paniculatas, but I got to tell you, I did plant this in my yard, and I was last year, and I was really taken with this plant. And I was prepared not to be, because, you know, everybody's coming out with plants that seem to age to this pink now. So how different are these pinks? I mean, let's be serious. You know, we have, you know, I love, what is it? Firelight Tidbit. How could I forget that? I have that in my landscape too, and I love that plant. And obviously many of you love that plant. So how different could this really be than that, with that great color that Firelight Tidbit gets and that compact nature? Well, obviously Little Lime Punch is a little bit larger growing than that. And the flowers are definitely larger growing. And they're profuse, there's no doubt about it. It is compact form, but it's not really what I would call a dwarf like Firelight Tidbit is. But, you know, it's really great form. They have that little lime thing that I kind of like. The flowers come out, they start off sort of that lime green, maybe not as dark lime green as little lime itself, but the flowers are a little larger than straight little lime. But the show, you know, I look at this picture here, and people look at that and say, it has to be Photoshop. They can't really be that dark red. And I'll have to say, from my landscape, they really were almost a true red by the time they finished in the fall. It was really kind of a remarkable transformation. Again, I was going in trying not to like this plant, and I'll have to say, with the color, the flower power, that kind of lime green to white to really that deepish red color, there, you know, it's really a good plant. You know, it's sometimes we want to dislike some of these plants that come on, but I got to say, I was wrong in disliking this. Really good hardiness. This is a great plant that if you haven't tried, you need to try it. Little Hottie, well, why did I include this? Since again, it was a 22 introduction. I included it because, you know, we felt that we fumbled this introduction for you guys last year. This is a first editions plant. I happen to think it's probably in a lot of ways the best PG panicle hydrangea that they have introduced into the program. It's a compact plant. the flowers on it, that picture on the left really doesn't do it justice. We had these out growing last year, and of course, last summer was not the best time to sell any plant, hydrangea or any, because of the amount of drought we had around here, and so we didn't have great business, especially on this new plant. But the size of the flowers on those plants was immense. I couldn't believe that a plant that was that compact had flower size as big as that. So nearly covered the plant out there with what I would call big 8 to 10 inch kind of towers of white bloom. They don't age to super pink like we just saw with Little Lime Punch, but what they do age to is a nice antique-y green with pink color, which is subtle, but I think pretty nice looking. So I like the form. I like the huge flower heads. I like the fact that it really blooms heavily. What happened with this for us last year, we got the liners in too late. We had it in our catalog for spring of 22. We couldn't sell any in spring of 22. We kind of did all the bad things for a new introduction in 22 that occasionally happens here, So I would say that we're going to ask you for your forgiveness on this and actually try this plant, because just on the size of flowers, you're going to love this. Vilma is asking, how does this plant compare to Bobo? Bobo is a little more compact. The flower cones are much smaller on Bobo than on Little Hottie, and you're going to find that you're probably as good of a plant as Bobo is. This is going to have that same kind of coverage, just in basically bigger, more splashier flowers. So this is Hydrangea paniculata Little Hottie. Hydrangea pufferfish. I do constantly wonder where some of these names come from. I've talked to Tim Wood out there, some out at Spring Meadow, who's naming all these plants out there, and I'll have to say he plays it a little close to the vest on many of these names, but pufferfish is one that frankly we have kind of shaken our heads about a little bit here at Pride's Corner, but it's a hard name to forget, so maybe that's the right way of looking at it. So what is this plant all about? New introduction for 2023. It's what I would call a medium-sized paniculata hydrangea. So it's not a true dwarf like Bobo. It's sort of in that Little Lime Punch range. How is it different than others? Again, that picture on the right-hand side is indicative of what you're going to see. Incredible amount of bloom, so that it kind of obscures the plant. Very attractive, different type of texture, I would say. It's a much lighter texture on that flower. It really adds something even a little bit different to all this. And I'm distracted because I'm looking at Tori's. Can you seriously tell us why they have so many new introductions? Why do we need all these? Well, it's a great question. I think you'd have to ask people that are in this room why there's so many of these introductions. I would say that the probability is that they sell. I mean, yes, we are trying to remove many of the older varieties that I think some of the newer ones have surpassed. But you can raise a great point about there being a lot of hydrangeas out there, and we feel the same way. But frankly, these introductions are different, and so we feel that there's some redeeming value, as do obviously the people that have been breeding this or putting them into programs. So that's definitely a point that everybody in our industry has to talk about. But I'm here to tell you why this plant looks good, and then that's what I'm doing. So, but a lot of cut flower possibilities here. It's not a great color turner, to be honest with you, but lots of great texture, I think, in the landscape and great flower power. Well, Tori, I'm not going to disagree with you about the confusion, but frankly, it's your decision in a lot of ways what you carry at your garden center too. I mean, if you feel that it creates that confusion, and I'm certainly not disagreeing with you. You know, you have that opportunity to pick and choose the plants that you want, and I appreciate you raising those concerns. There's no doubt about it. So that's hydrangea pufferfish. And this is hydrangea tiny quickfire. So let's talk about what this is. So this is probably the smallest of any paniculata that you're going to get. It's probably also the earliest blooming one. So again, this is one that's doing a couple things here. It's stretching the bloom season. Again, what we've seen with this plant is that it's in full bloom by the beginning of June. It's budded up in May. That is incredibly early, as we know, for a paniculata. It's very small form. In fact, what we're finding is that it's really a slow grower. Making this fit in a container and be saleable is going to take more time for us than most paniculatas will. But what I like about this plant is, again, the amount of flower power there. The early blooming thing is really an important thing for trying to really get people that are in your garden center at that time, because we of course know that that's still in the middle of the spring season. Having that ability to have a paniculata that really can intersect with that biggest group of people in the landscape is going to be a plus for you guys at the garden center level. So this is the hydrangea paniculata tiny quickfire. Again, another one that Proven Winners will be publicizing heavily this year. So let's move on to a spirea. Well, geez, I mean, there's a lot of spirea on the market here also, isn't there? Especially recently, you know, it's sort of funny the way particular genera are kind of looked at. You know, for a lot of years, maybe about 10 years ago, we looked at spireas and said, you know, hey, they got everything covered here. You know, there wasn't a lot of movement, not a lot of new spirea, and all of a sudden there is. So here's Spirea Little Spark, and you know, it's not a plant that's in the first editions program. I'm going to guarantee you that it's probably not a plant that you've seen that much around. We have not sold tons of this plant since it came on the market last spring. But what we really were taken with on this plant was seriously the amount of early spring color that this plant brought to the table. This plant, Little Spark, really had the best color of any new plant, any new foliage plant coming out there in spring. So it was better. We felt it had a better look than some of the than all of the Proven Winners ones, which are arguably great plants and colorful. We thought the color on this in the spring flush was even better. So even on that alone, it's great. Obviously, you know, it's a nice tight grower. It's going to have great foliage color, although not as good as in the early spring throughout the summer. It's got you know, ample pink flowers. It'll rebloom if you do a little trimming on it like we do around here, but it's a low maintenance, low care plant. But that early spring flush is what I would call riveting in the landscape. So this is Spirea Little Spark, part of the first editions program. Syringa. Well, as you guys know, we grow a lot of syringa here, and so we're always receptive to new varieties. This particular variety is I'll have to say the flower power on it is kind of unsurpassed. Now, this is not a hyacinth flora, not a vulgaris. This is really more of a small leaf type. Think of palabin, that kind of thing. I look at this as a palabin with at least double the blooming power. Now, I look at the close up. I look at the picture on the right. You know, I would say that the color is a little more like the one on the picture on the left. I think that one on the right makes it look like it's really kind of a lavender one. I look at this as a pinky lavender kind of thing, so more of a pink color. But you may judge differently on that. But I look at this and I say that the biggest thing about this is the compact nature, the incredible hardiness, and the amount of bloom that you get on the plant. It really is an exceedingly strong bloomer. And of course, it's a perfect plant for smaller landscape places, but also to attract pollinators to your landscape. So this is Syringa Dream Cloud, a really nice new introduction. Now, Pink Teeny is another one that's kind of an interesting one. And I'll give you a reason why. It's a Prestoniana. These are plants that we used to grow a number of back in let's say, a generation ago. Why are Preston lilacs important? Well, for people that are way up north, this is the lilac that's going to make it and what's going to bloom. Well, how come they're different from regular lilacs? Well, people look at them and say, well, they're a sort of lilac. And why people say that is because it's not what they're used to for the real fragrant bloom, the bigger flower heads, the different type of foliage. I grant you all of that, but these plants have a place in not just the far north landscape, but even in our more temperate landscapes. It's dense and compact. It's bulletproof in the landscape. It's always going to bloom. It blooms later than regular lilac, which extends the season for lilacs in the landscape, which is always a good thing. And it's a super dependable bloomer. And again, it's going to be a great for butterflies and hummingbirds. You might even be able to grow this one in a container. It's that tolerant. So this is Syringa Pink Teeny. It's a first editions plant. I know a lot of people don't know this plant, and Prestonianas feel like they're from another era, but they really deserve to be looked at. And I think that this is one that would be the gateway for you looking at further of these types of Syringa. Well, hedging plants. So as we know, with all that went on with COVID, all of a sudden people are spending a lot more times in their yard, and hedging plants, even if they weren't big beforehand, were certainly big during COVID and afterwards. So we saw a lot of different types of tall, narrow growing evergreens coming out. And this may be the fastest growing, tallest, narrowest one of the bunch. This is called Full Speed Ahead American Pillar. It's a mouthful. We've grown this plant. Man, this plant will grow. If you get it in the landscape, it'll definitely grow. It's a strong, upright plant, a single leader. Again, it's worth talking about because, of course, if you look at what's happened to many arborvitae out there, the multiple leader, the snow damage that happens from arborvitae having multiple leaders is just that won't happen with this plant. This is a strong single stem plant, fits in a very narrow area. Yeah, you got to have some upright to it. Very hardy, zone 3 hardy, but this is going to be a big plant, I think. Right now, Joshua is asking what size are we selling these in? I believe right now we only have 3s and 5s, but that will change next year. We're still getting up and running with this plant. There are some out there. Next year is when you're going to see a lot of those bigger sizes. Deer resistance, I would say it's I would say no. You know, even the placatas that are out there have some deer resistance, but they still can be eaten. And this is going to be always a problem with an occidentalis type. I'd be the first one to say that, Leslie. So, and Stephen is asking that same question. I would say that there's going to be marginal deer resistance on these plants. So this is full speed ahead, American Pillar, and you'll be seeing a lot more of this plant for sure. Here's another one called Cheer Drops. This is in the Proven Winners program, and I look at this as filling a need. What's one of the things that a lot of old school people that have been in the nursery for a while, it's always that kind of that fatter arborvitae. And the name is escaping me right now. I bet Ray remembers this, but there's an arborvitae that people have always wanted. Some people want, but we never can find it or grow enough for. There you go. Thanks, Ray. It's Techne, of course, Techne. You know, you'd think that'd be emblazoned in my mind, being as old as I am and being in this industry for so long. But this really has that form of a Techne arborvitae. It's kind of that fat. Yeah, it gets taller, but it gets taller. There's no doubt. But it's got that kind of that full, dense, but lower and wider type of form to it. Really grows well. Nice foliage. I would say that it's not as dark green as some of the Thuya occidentalis, you know, those dark American arborvitae, but it's really pleasant. It kind of reminds me to a certain extent of even that emerald green color. So a little bit different color, great texture, easy to grow. So this is Thuya Cheer Drops, a little bit of a different look on a hedging plant. Now, listen, I really like viburnums, and there's zillions of them out there. I like this, but this plant, I think, is an incredible improvement on summer snowflake. This is, I think this is a summer, I would call this kind of a summer snowflake on the juice, if you will. This is a plant that is going to set bud real early and really continues to bloom throughout the season. You know, we had these last year, and the gentleman that grows this plant on the nursery, you know, he's a guy that's a little bit conservative, and he really doesn't like to put stuff out there on the availability until he thinks it's ready to go. So this was kind of what we would call here new production plants. It was late in May, and he called me and said, "Hey, you got to come out and look at this plant. I can't believe what this plant is doing out here." So I went out there, and like I said, I wasn't as familiar with it either, but I went out there, and here's this plant that had bulked up really well, that was already in color out there, and the whole block just looked like a sea of white flowers out there. It's a compact plant. You know, we know viburnum can be huge in a lot of ways, but this is kind of user and space friendly. But the bloom power is amazing on this, incredibly long blooming. It's got a nice fall color to it. There's a lot to recommend this, and I would say that in comparing it to summer snowflake, this stays in bloom a lot longer. And you know, summer snowflake does this thing a lot of times where it has a few flowers open, but a lot of kind of past flowers on it. So it kind of muddies the look of the plant and the landscape. I did not notice that at all with this plant this year. So our sales guys like this plant, and you guys are going to like this plant. This is kind of that real, a little bit different genus for that time of year, but a perfect summer bloomer that's going to really dress up people's landscapes and actually have some flower power. Is Steady Eddie pollinator friendly? We have noticed that there is a good amount of pollinator activity when I was out there in the field on it. So I'm going to say that that's a yes. But I think also that it's going to take a little bit more time to see to quantify that. So those are the shrubs. Let's talk a little bit about roses. This is another genus that obviously there's a zillion introductions a year, but what I'll say about roses and what I like about all the new introductions with a lot of the roses is that they're great landscape plants. So let's talk about these reminiscent roses, which are all proven winners roses. What's great about them? Well, what they're trying to do, obviously, if you look at the flower form, is talk about that David Austin type of flower form. You'll see that in some of the other varieties too. So what proven winners, what they did is that they were searching for great genetics throughout the world, and they came upon this group in Eastern Europe that was doing a lot of rose breeding, and they were very intrigued looking at the plants they were coming up with, because what their goal was to have really a better, if you will, a more disease resistant, easier to grow David Austin type of rose out there in the market. And these reminiscents are really good at that. They're their own root, which is, to me, is really the entry ticket for anybody growing roses in a program. So own root, disease resistant foliage, fragrant flowers, excellent blooming throughout the year, clean plants. I've looked at these for 2 or 3 years running now in the test gardens out in Michigan. For that the proven winners shrubs have their big test garden out there. I've been impressed by these plants, and I think you will be too, and your customers will be too. I mean, this is a plant that obviously will sell in the spring, but as I always tell people out in the garden centers, people are demanding roses all year. We sort of don't like that in this industry. And I've been on the garden center end of things. You always wanted to clear out of your roses by the beginning of June, but we're doing a disservice, quite honestly, when we're doing that. These are roses that people want to buy throughout the year, and roses are the least. We think that hydrangeas are the consumer's least common denominator. Everybody knows hydrangea. I'm going to tell you that 10 times the amount of customers know roses, and they're looking for them out there. We are, if we want to satisfy the consumers of the world out there, it's with roses, because that's the thing that really is on their minds throughout the year. So this is reminiscent crema. This is coral. You can see that flower form even more, actually a great color. This is the one that originally got my attention in looking at it in the test gardens out at Spring Meadow. And this is reminiscent pink. Again, great colors, good scent, easy to grow, a really nice plants. So that's the reminiscent series. And then we have the Rise Up series. So what is good about these? Well, they're a mini climber. And so how important is that? Well, I think it's really important. And the reason is because there's lots of great climbing roses in the market, but they all are, you know, you're out there like a dragon slayer in the landscape many times. You know, you're out there with the chair and whip beating back that sometimes those climbers that really outgrow their place and, you know, really are kind of, you need that upward. You love that idea that it's going to have that kind of fills the landscape in the way it does. But they're hard. They tend to outgrow their spaces. These will not outgrow their space. I think 3 to 5 feet is probably a little bit small, but it may be underestimating that. But let's face it, if you have a New Dawn, a Blaze, you know, some of those old ones that are out there on the market, they really are like 10 to 15 foot plants. I mean, you have to duck and cover sometimes when you're growing those plants. So these are nice, neat habits, good flower, lots of reblooming, not a lot of deadheading needed, and good disease resistance. So this is Rise Up Amberness. I'm going to pause a second. Dave is asking, how good is the disease resistant on the reminiscent roses? it's really good. Is it bulletproof? Well, no rose I would say is completely bulletproof, but if I'm looking at them in the continuum of roses from, let's say, hybrid tea roses, which are really like the end of the world for bad disease resistance, to, let's say, things like knockouts and many other of the newer roses that have come in that have displayed great disease resistant. This is pretty close to that knockout level, Dave, is what I would say. So those reminiscents are good. And as are these rise ups. So this is amberness. This is lilac days. Again, you got to love that color. That color is not out there very much. Again, super fragrant too, like a lot of the lavender shaded roses are. And this is Ringo, kind of got that little bit of this bicolor. So I think these are great plants. If you haven't tried them, you should try them. Mini climbers, I think people are interested. So those are the roses we want to talk about. So let's finish up with some great perennials. Well, if you're not selling a lot of agastache, you're not really trying. That's what I would say. And as we know, there's been lots of new series that have come on the market in the past few years. This is the Meant to Be series that we're talking about here. This is Queen Nectarine and Royal Raspberry, strong bloomers and great summer bloom. But you know, the biggest thing that if you are not doing this, and by the way, these are proven winners, new proven winners selections, but you are overlooking, if you're not growing any agastache in your garden, you're overlooking great summer color. You're overlooking plants that are really drought and heat tolerant, to grow really and shine in areas that maybe other plants don't do well. But just for any agastache, just the pollinator magnetism of these plants is just amazing. I mean, even years ago when there weren't all these different agastaches in the market, if you look at a late summer garden for perennials, there's lots of good perennials out there for pollinator support. But let me tell you, if you go into a garden where there's agastache growing, you can see what the pollinators really go to first, and that is these agastaches. So they're good plants. Again, grow well in poor areas. This is Queen Nectarine, which has that nice little orangey and pink color, and Royal Raspberry, which is really got a great display of that kind of raspberry pink color, and against a little bit darker foliage too, which I think is a great contrast. So this is agastaches Meant to Be in the Proven Winners program, and I think you'll be really happy about them. Mary Ann is asking whether agastache is rabbit resistant. That's a great question. I do not know. Since it is deer resistant, I'm thinking that there probably would have some rabbit resistance, but I'd be lying to tell you that I had firsthand knowledge of that or have read something about it. So that's something that we can do a little bit more research on. Thanks for the question, Mary Ann. So Aster cordifolius. Now you're saying, geez, Aster cordifolius has been on the market forever. Why would this be a new introduction? Well, what we are looking at here is a little bit different movement that's happened as we've been in the native plant business as heavily as we have been, and that is that straight species are back to being more important, and their importance, honestly, in the landscape has not gone away. I mean, we knew that. It's just that many of them have been more difficult either to come by or to grow. Now, this particular plant is really sort of a backbone plant for any shadier garden for fall bloom. if you go out into shady areas, you'll notice in late summer and fall that there's like this drifting effect that can happen under trees with all these asters that are growing there, and they're incredibly important, these asters, for a lot of different reasons. One, just the sheer amount of power, flower power supports loads of pollinators at that time of year. Two, they provide just this kind of wave effect that it's great texturally and appearance wise in the landscape for late summer and fall. And what I would say also is that this particular one, Cordifolius, has a little bit different kind of flower than Vericatus. Vilma is asking about Vericatus, which is a great comparison. Vericatus is really more of that straight white color. This has got that really different tone. They all are very good at doing what they're doing and being able to survive in many different areas, especially under trees. But so that's how I would compare those two. It's just a color differential, but great color, easy to grow, very hardy, very important plant in the late summer and fall landscape. So this is Aster cordifolius in our American Beauties program. Another plant that another old school plant that all of a sudden is new school again, it would be Campanula rotundifolia. Everybody's been familiar with lots of different campanulas in the market, but this is really the original in a lot of ways. So it's a little bit bigger form. The flowers are a little bit higher up above the plant. Those real big bell flowers that are so inviting for different pollinators and hummingbirds during the time that they're in bloom. Very easy to grow. That blue color still is a great color and really harder to find still in the landscape. This is a great airiness, great texture to the garden, and we're happy to bring back the original Campanula bluebell to our mix in the American Beauties Native Plant Program. So good in sun, good in partial shade, perfect for massing. Lots of bloom throughout the spring and summer. Just an easy to grow plant that, especially if you're working in kind of meadow plantings and stuff like that, this is a great plant to mix in. So Campanula rotundifolia. So we talked about a couple shrubs in the Bloom and Easy program. Well, one of the great things is that they have looked to also have perennials in their program. So what they're really trying to do is to make it easier for you guys as trying to sell a program throughout the year, because as we know, even though sometimes we set up our garden centers differently, people are looking for plants that grow in together. Then they buy them not as separate things, but they want some of those lower things that bloom as part of their programs. And so there's an introduction of a bunch of different perennials in the Bloom and Easy program, and we're happy to support that. This Coreopsis we had at our show in Mance this year. I was really impressed. Wasn't that familiar with this plant, to be honest with you, until we started trying to force it and having it in our show. And what I saw about this plant is that it's got a lot of bloom power. A lot of Coreopsis are not really good to force. This was a great plant to force. It was really tolerant. It bloomed very quickly. It bloomed and it bloomed heavily. I have not seen this in the landscape myself at this point, but let's face it, Coreopsis are a great plant usually for growing in sandier areas. They love hot sun areas. We all know that Coreopsis is usually attractive to pollinators. There's no doubt about it. Good dark foliage, lots of pom-pom types of bloom, and they have that steadiness that Coreopsis is always going to bring to the garden. So this is Coreopsis golden sphere, and if you haven't seen this plant, you're going to like it on your bench because it's going to draw a crowd. It just is that kind of touchable flower that people love to buy. Well, you probably heard us talking in past years about these Delphinium delgenius, and if you haven't grown this this family of delphiniums, this is really the family that you're going to like. This is what is rewarding about delphiniums. Now, let's face it, delphiniums are just an amazing flower. There's just not a bigger attention getter in the garden. But as we know, with a lot of the old school delphiniums, that they tend to be kind of a maintenance heavy plant. What do I mean by that? Well, they tend to be tall, skinny plants. They don't really branch well. The flowers that they have are these huge flowers, and you end up really having that. In order to have them be able to hold up in the wind or the heavy rain that can happen, you're out there staking these plants many times. With the Delgenius delphiniums, you have far less of that. You still have that nice foliage, but you have a more compact, more heavily branched plant, a little bit lower profile. There's no two ways about it, but look at all that bloom and all those buds on these plants. This is this is kind of what I would call delphinium done the right way, if you will. This is delphinium that you can enjoy without having to, be out there and garden patrol every day, making sure that you're staking it so it doesn't fall over, that the plant just doesn't collapse out there. Lots of bloom, lots of big bloom, just like you expect on regular delphiniums. You can't go wrong with this plant. This is going to make you want to plant more delphinium in the garden, and it's going to make your customers feel much better about delphinium. So we have here glitzy, which is that great blue wide-eyed flower, and we have pure white Neva that we're bringing on this year. But deer resistant, lots of branching, attracts pollinators, reblooming. I mean, what else could you want from this plant? So this is the real delphinium that you should be selling to your customers right here. This is Delgenius, glitzy, and Neva. Well, you can't, there's always new dianthus coming out in the market, isn't there? And they tend to come and go. This is a PW one. This is one that's here to stay. And the reason I've seen this plant, I love the size of the flower and I love the color of the flower. This is funky fuchsia, and it really has that kind of true old-fashioned flower form, but the color is awesome. The foliage is great on it. That color shows spectacularly against that foliage color. Heavy bloom, long blooming. This will bloom in the spring. It'll bloom in the summer. Again, a plant that really puts on a show here. So, and easy to grow and stuff that you can use, quite honestly, in many places. This isn't a true dwarf dianthus. It tends to be a little bit bigger, so it's only 8 to 10 feet tall, and that probably accounts for the flowers being above the foliage. Spreads a little bit more, probably it's a foot to a foot and a half or so. A slow spreader, good hardiness, good presence in the garden. Because of bloom and foliage. So, and like all dianthus, they tend to be they tend to be a little bit more tolerant in certain places in the landscape. So I really like this. This is Dianthus Fruit Punch Funky Fuchsia. It's in the Proven Winners program, and it really will put on a great show for you. Dicentra, well, if there's a signature spring perennial, it's this one, isn't it? This is this is what tells me in my garden that we've finally gotten through the crappy cold weather, and that we're going to see some bloom in the garden. Yeah, I know hellebores do that, but hellebores can be super easy early, and sometimes can be a little bit more of a tease. But this plant in the garden, you know, it feels like April, late April now, and you know you're safe almost. And so what's great about this plant? Well, it's not the it's got that great form of bleeding heart flower, but it's a really pastel. It's not white, but it's got that nice pale pink flower color, as you can see in the pictures. It's really a nice dense plant, but it gives you some flower variation, very dependable to bloom. You know, it's shown in a container. I'll have to say that I've never really tried to grow a dicentra, a full dicentra spectabilis in a container. I would say it would look great, but until it stops blooming, and then I would put it in the garden right away for sure. They're great in the garden, as you know, with bleeding hearts. They have a tendency, once the warm weather comes on, that they kind of fade and disappear in the landscape, but they're ready for you next year. They're really easy to grow, perfect for partial shade, and I think a great plant because that subtleness of flower color. So this is Dicentra spectabilis Cupid. So this is kind of an interesting plant right here. This is Elmis, and it's called bottle brush grass, and I'm betting that a lot of people on this are certainly not familiar with this. I've seen this plant, and there's a number of things that I really like about this plant. That inflorescence right there is really singular. It really, and it adds such great texture to the landscape. I really like that. You know, a lot of people sometimes it's all about color kind of thing, but these combinations of different types of flowers, different types of foliage really add a lot of interest to the garden. This is a perfect plant for just naturalizing in particular areas, and you know, what's great about it is that it really does well in really poor soil areas, and it will tolerate some shade also. So all good things for plants like this. I think these are the plants that you can kind of plant out in an area, get them established, and they do everything else by themselves, it seems. So, and what that means is they spread out, they look great. They're great plants to intermix with other plants. They don't, they're not overbearing kind of thing, but they are part of the great texture of a garden. This plant really grows well in spring and fall. This is what we would call a cool season grass. It's a great larval host for butterflies. This plant's got a lot going for it. Many people have not really heard of this plant, but I've seen it in the landscape, and this is something that if you're looking at an overall landscape, these are kind of great, subtle yet backbone plants to a garden. So this is bottle brush grass, Elmis. Well, listen, you can't talk about perennials without talking about at least a couple of Hemerocallis. Come on, you know, this is, I would say, still is kind of a least common denominator for consumers out there. And there's good reason for this. As we know, you know, we tend to disdain maybe Hemerocallis in a lot of ways. It seems kind of plain Jane to us, but you know, the great things you can always sell about Hemerocallis is just that they're so easy to grow. They are such great landscape survivors. In fact, you know, let's face it, we know that because of that, they're overused to a certain extent in many landscapes. But, you know, used in you know, in small groups kind of thing for beginning gardeners, these are plants that are incredibly rewarding. So let's talk about King of the Ages here. This is a PW plant that really came from Walter's Gardens. What's great about this plant? Well, the flower scape is up above with this big kind of 5 to 6 inch flower on it. It blooms really dependably. I love that kind of dark eye on it. It's a showy flower. There's no two ways about it. And it's a plant that really does bloom dependably. Like all Hemerocallis, it's really actually a pretty good pollinator plant. They really do attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, especially something that has that kind of red target, if you will, like that. That's always kind of a dead giveaway for hummingbirds finding that plant. But perfect for grouping, easy to grow, full sun, partial shade, great hardiness. Part of the PW program. This is Hemerocallis Rainbow Rhythm, King of the Ages. And this is another rainbow rhythm plant, Hemerocallis. This is Lake of Fire right here. So a little bit different flower form. This is maybe the biggest flower out there. This is like a 6 to 7 inch diameter flower, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. And it's really more of a flattened form. If you look back to the previous, sorry, my desk phone's going off there. That's that ringing you heard in the background. I should have shut that off to begin with. So, but if you look back to the previous one, you can see that the King of Age is a little more tubular, and Lake of Fire is a little bit more open, bigger, fatter ring, really frilly flower edges, all the same stuff that's great about Hemerocallis that we talked about in the last slide really carries over here. This is a little bit denser of a plant, so probably not going to have that big amount of height that you got, but that flower color is killer, is what it comes down to. So, and I know someone was talking about rabbit resistance. I can say with good knowledge that because I have rabbits in my yard, they do not come near these Hemerocallis. So this is Rainbow Rhythm Lake of Fire. Well, let's face it, heuchera may be the hydrangea of the perennial world. There's always zillions of heucheras out there, and how do you tell between the two? It's really a good question. They're all these almost feel like fashion here, I would say. You know, it's like if you buy let's say you buy running shoes, kind of thing. You know, you can never get the same shoe a year down the line. They've always made some change to it, some color to it, some color differential. So there always seems like there's new plants coming in here. This is one of the new Bloom and Easy introductions. I again saw this plant because we forced some for the Manch show, and I'm always kind of a sucker for these silvery foliaged ones like this. And what I think sometimes is that the silver is just as effective with a greenback as it is with a red back. And this, I think, proves my point. Great looking foliage here. A substantial red bloom, as you can see, really contrasts well with the foliage. It's got a pretty long bloom season. That color especially. People don't think of heuchera as being really a pollinator attractors, but they really do a great job with those flowers. And they do. If you go out in your garden when they're in bloom, you'll see the activity around them. So excellent plant. Of course, with all heuchera, they love and tolerate really well-drained soils, that kind of thing. But this is Heuchera City Paris. And I love, as I said, that silvery look. This is a Proven Winners one. This is part of their Dolce series, and this is Frosted Berry. And again, these are the ones that I would pick for sure, because again, there's something about that silver foliage and with the contrasting venation, that dark venation is really kind of a great look, if you ask me. So again, some of the same really great things out there. I'm looking at Bruce D's comment, like hydrangea, how many heuchera do we need? You're absolutely right about that. But like I said, everybody seems to gravitate to these things, and it's like these are the things that get people into the garden centers. It seems in the spring, and I'm not sure that they're looking at a lot of varieties. You're right, but they're just looking at the ooh and ah effect of that. And I look at this foliage, and there's certainly a lot of ooh and ah here. So great container plant. That's what I like about a lot of heuchera anyway. They do well in mixed containers. In bloom, they detract bees and hummingbirds, like we said previously. Lots of great stuff going on here, and color all year because of the foliage. So this is Heuchera dolce frosted berry. Now this looks like really kind of a plain Jane plant. Why would we put Hosta Royal Crest on here? Well, there's a real big place for green hosta in the landscape, as we know. And probably the plant that has always been the poster child for green hosta has been Royal Standard. And you know, it's a good Royal Standard has been no pun intended, the standard of green hosta in the landscape, but it really gets damaged heavily by slugs. This one is really much more resistant to it. Still has the same fragrant flowers and white, which is great because, as we know, it seems like most of the hosta bloom either lavender or lavender blue. That white is a great contrast out there. Good foliage. Yeah, the foliage isn't going to knock your socks off, but you need some of that green to in those kinds of areas where you're planting hosta. So very effective and great slug resistance, and that's why we've thrown in heavily with this variety, because we think it's just going to be better for you and for the consumer. So this is Hosta Royal Crest. Well, you always got to throw in a German iris. I mean, come on. You know, I love German iris. We happen at Pride's Corner to grow outstanding German iris. It's a plant that frankly is not grown as much as it used to be on the market. And I would say that that's a shame, because German iris are an awesome plant to have in the landscape when you plant it in the right place. And what I would say of the right place is well-drained soil, not wet feet, places that really sometimes you don't want to put perennials in because they don't perform as well. But iris loves sandy areas. I knew somebody who had a house out on Block Island, and the backbone of their garden was German iris because they just thrived in that kind of location. Sun, ultra drainage, and of course they're deer proof, and out in Block Island, believe me, you need deer proof plants because they're overrun by deer. So what about this plant? Well, I love the intriguing, the kind of almost wine red crimson color to it with those great contrasting yellow beards. You know, the iris foliage is always great, and good texture in the landscape to break it up. Good cut flower. They're like all iris fragrant. This is a rebloomer, I know, because we only grow reblooming iris. So you'll get some color in the fall about this. So this is Iris Germanica Paprika Phono. If you have not been buying German iris from us, I think we grow the best, and we have a great selection of color. So take a look and see what you can get from us. Well, lilies, you know, this is Lilium Fantasiatic. It's a mouthful, but I know what they were trying to get at. They should have just put it in a word that was a little easier to pronounce, I suppose. But this is a great new series of lilies that we're growing, Asiatic lilies. An important part of the landscape, I think, just because they're good, dependable, deer-proof color. They thrive in sunny areas. They love well-drained soil. They're good pollinator attractors. They're extremely hardy. There's loads of great colors. You're going to see, you see the 5 that we're talking about here. I think lilies get overlooked in the landscape quite a little bit. There's lots of things that seem more important in the landscape. And of course, you know, they're a good color item to sell for people at the garden center, but I think a lot of times we don't use them and focus on them enough in as great plants to use in a landscape for good, tolerant, dependable color in sometimes sandier or hot areas. So this series is great. I would say that you can see that color strain, that color grouping out there. So these are Fantasiatic lilies. I think I almost got that right that time. Of course, you know, loads of people love Oriental lilies. They tend to be, I think they're, let me put it to you this way, they're spectacular flowers. They're not as easy to grow as the Asiatics because they're bigger plants. They need a little bit more. They can be kind of gawky, so they need some underplanting, but you can't beat the immense flower power that's out there from these things. I mean, just as a single plant, as a cutting plant, they're just amazing flowers. So Casablanca, obviously from the name, great white, pure white flower, a little bit of a green throat. Love the stamens there and their contrast with the petals. That's really neat. So this is Lilium Casablanca. And this is, well, Stargazer, which has been out there for a while, but we're bringing it back this year. And, you know, this is kind of like the quintessential Oriental lily, you know, outstanding color, strong scent. There's no two ways about it. Really good garden plant for attracting pollinators and butterflies for sure. But, you know, really a great color. And if you have a planting, if any of your customers are doing cutting gardens, this is the real deal right here. So Lilium Stargazer. Well, mints, come on. You know, everybody knows about mints for better or for worse out there, but this is a native mint. This is our native mint to this area. And so why, again, part of our American Beauty's native plants, but what's the why on this plant? Well, the why on this plant is that it's a great plant for rain gardens. The natural place for this plant in the landscape is moist areas, and they grow well in shade also. So this is a perfect plant for planting into wet areas. What's also good about it? Well, you know, it blooms well, it grows well, it's fast growing like all mints are, as we know. And but the bloom on it is incredibly attractive to pollinators. And it's a good plant for areas that are tough to grow in. Wet areas are really incredibly difficult at times. Now, what's great about native plants is, of course, we have plenty of plants in the American Beauties mix that are perfect for putting in rain areas. So it takes wet areas, it will grow. It's a plant that you want to put in an area and group with other plants. There's no doubt about it. It's I would say that you know, one of the bullet points is that it's an essential plant for native bees. There's no doubt about it. But if you have one of those areas that is difficult, this is the plant for you, and you'll be rewarded by that, as will the pollinators in your landscape. Well, panicum, you know, panicum we grow a lot of panicums, and I still say that they're overlooked in the landscape. This plant is, you know, most people are probably familiar with Shenandoah because of the red foliage color that it gets on its leaves, especially as we get towards the cooler temperatures. I would say that this is a better red than Shenandoah by far. So, well, what's great about all panicum to begin with? A good native grass, very tolerant, you know, great texture, those open frilly seed heads are really nice plants. And but what this does even better is the coloration. Starts off really kind of a blue-green foliage, and really by the time you get into September, as the weather is cooling, this is almost completely red. So you'll probably see very little green at that point. So that transition is really a great thing for your landscape. That great color transition. So an improved Shenandoah for color. All panicums are drought resistant. They really add great texture to the landscape. And of course, they're called switch grasses. And one of the reasons for that, if you're in a garden when you with a number of panicum around, you hear that particular sound as the wind goes through. It's kind of like a swishing, if you will, that happens because of the lightness of the texture, which is kind of unique. And it's where panicums get that switchgrass name from. So great for grouping, easy to grow. This is a plant that we may think is subtle, but it's a great panicum to talk about with consumers. Deer proof, great for full sun. This is Panicum Red Flame. Well, phlox, I mean, there's no bigger native plant probably than a Phlox paniculata. This is a proven winner's one. I'll have to say that I'm particularly taken with this color that you see there. You know, there's lots of purples, there's lots of whites, there's some, fuchsia ranges in paniculata, but this kind of corally orangey red tinge is, it's a sort of a riveting color, and it's really not what there's not a lot of varieties like that. So I'm automatically drawn to that color right there. Like a lot of the new phlox coming out of the market, and most of the PW ones, they're really bred for disease resistance. So there's a lot less opportunity to have the powdery mildew plague that happens on a lot of old school phlox out there. It's more of a compact plant. It's not the tallest of phlox, so you get kind of that more bulky plant, but as you can see, covered with bloom, great hardiness, deer resistance, attracts pollinators, all the great things about paniculata phlox, but with that really kind of riveting color. So this is Phlox paniculata Luminary Sunset Coral. Well, Rudbeckia, come on, who doesn't love Rudbeckia for later in the year? And what I like about this Rudbeckia is that, well, it's a seed form plant, so it's really dependable. It's a long blooming season, but what's great about this is that, let's face it, the world of Rudbeckia is a lot of times measured against Goldsturm, and it's the predominant plant still out there in the market, but this stretches the season 3 weeks earlier to bloom than Goldsturm is. So that in itself stretches the season. Really good compact plant, much better for foliage issues. As we know, sometimes Goldsturm can be difficult for foliage. This Gold Blitz does not have that. Attracts bees and butterflies, birds, butterflies, bees. Like all of these plants, the seed that's left over once the flowers go by, birds love that, and it's one of the great things that you get from any Rudbeckia in the garden. So good color, earlier color, easy to take care of, and less problems. How can you ask for more for a summer fall plant? This is Rudbeckia Gold Blitz. Well, here's an interesting plant right here. This is part of our American Beauties Native Plant Program, and Scutellaria, let me tell you, is not really in the mainstream for perennials out there. A lot of perennial guys really love this plant, and there's a lot to love here. There's no doubt about it. what we like about Appalachian Blues is it's more compact habit when compared to regular Scutellaria. It's clump forming type of thing. The older Scutellaria has a tendency to run and spread more. Great bloom and summer bloom too. So getting that summer bloom is really important, I think. Perfect plant for partial shade. So it really tolerates some shadier conditions. Again, Scutellaria is not a plant that everybody knows out there, but they probably should. It's really an easy plant to grow. It's again perfect for attracting pollinators. Obviously, summer bloom, as I said, but it's really a kind of an attractive plant that more people should use. So this is Scutellaria Appalachian Blues in the American Beauties program. I think this is something that you guys got to even put in your own garden just to see what a great plant this is. Well, how many sedum do we need on the market? Geez, how many times do we ask that question today? This is so there's a lot of confusing sedum on the market too. I'd be the first one to say that. I like this conga line, though, this particular plant. You know, it's really ever changing is what I would tell you. It comes out with great green foliage. And by the end of the year, it's that dark, really almost purple foliage. And you know, with all purple foliage sedums, you sort of worry about, you know, the first ones that came out and with purple foliage, you know, a number of years back, always seems like they had foliage issues. They used to get this edema, it made them ugly. They used to be, you know, kind of floppy plants. These, after all these years, these plants like conga line are just so much better garden plants. You can see the texture, a little bit smaller kind of leaf there. I love that purple in combination with the green foliage, love that deep colored stem. But what I really like is those flowers. I mean, you know, this is kind of new to the sedum world from what I've seen, this sort of peach color with the creaminess involved there. I really like that flower color, especially when you're backing it with some of that foliage there. It doesn't seem like it'd be a great mix, those two colors, but guess what? It really does look great on these plants. So this is sedum conga line, great plant for massing. Of course, obviously, great bloom for kind of mid to late summer. Love the compact form, love the changeability of the foliage. I really like that. Well, I've been again just I'm looking at Karen Nelson's question about that and about native plants, and well, I'm going to tell you, Karen, you have an excellent point, but I would say that quite honestly. I agree with that, and I think people are very judgmental about native plants out there, and you know, since when is gardening supposed to be something that you know you're a slave to rules and you should be shamed out there because you're trying to do something good in the garden? You know, native plants, I would say that for better or for worse, I think there's lots of great people out there that are in the native plant area, that are really fired up about native plants, and I would tell you that that the consumer is fired up about native plants. They want to go out there and they want to bring life to their gardens. They are really focused on native plants because they feel that that they can do something good in the landscape. So why should people that are going and doing good things in the landscape be said, well, you're not really doing it the right way, and because you're not doing it the right way, in my opinion, you're completely wrong, and maybe even worse than if you didn't do it at all. I think that's the bad stuff that sometimes happens in our industry. We should be inclusive, is what it comes down to. You know, listen, I get it. that with restoration projects and certain and things like that, where there are these big projects, I think it's important to talk about where plants come from and all that. But to judge everybody by the same scale, and to as you say, Karen, to shame people for trying to do the right thing and feeling that they're doing a good thing, which they are, is wrong. And I think all of us have a part in trying to make that and make us more welcoming to the consumer out there. So, thanks for that opportunity, Karen, for me to climb up on the soapbox there. But I think that we in our industry always have to do the right thing and see who our customers are. And that's what that's all about. The final plant. Yeah, I bet you never thought we'd get here to the final plant. But this is another Bloom and Easy plant called Veronica Seaside. And Veronicas, I think, are another plant we take for granted in the garden. There's loads of great Veronicas out there in different colors, but I think there's sometimes we kind of ignored some of these plants that really are good plants in the landscape. I love the spikiness of this flower. I love how neat those flower heads are, how tall, skinny, yet tight they are. This is a long bloomer when it comes to Veronica, and I think that's one of the biggest things that has changed on Veronicas over the years, is that some of the ones that were really good in the market a few years back are really much shorter blooming time than plants like Veronica Seaside. Really like this plant, deer resistant, good for sun, good for butterflies, great dark green foliage, and as I said, lots of flower power there. So that is Veronica Seaside. Now we have a lot of other new plants that we're offering at Pride's Corner, and your sales teams are going to be happy to talk to you about those plants. And so this was just a picture, and quite honestly, a fairly long picture. So thanks for hanging in there. I still see that there's been a bunch of people that have stayed on. I really enjoyed talking about these plants and actually being able to answer questions for some guys here. So I will definitely hang around for a couple minutes for any other questions that come along. And I just want to remind you that 2 weeks from now, we will be having our another webinar having to do with our display programs and what they mean to you in the garden center and what we got to do to make it successful. But I really appreciate your time and your comments. We love doing these kinds of things. We should do more of them. There's no two ways about it. And we'll continue to try to do that. So thanks for being patient. Thanks for coming along for the ride here. And if there's any further questions, just let me know and I'll hang in there.
Thanks, Tim. I also want to say at the end of the presentation, or when you sign out, if the technology gods are with us today, you'll get a little survey. The survey is going to be about questions. We're looking at our availability, our emails. We'd love some feedback. It's not required, but if you can take a few minutes to give us some feedback on our availabilities, our emails, our website, online ordering, and that always helps us to become a better support for you. So I appreciate any feedback on those items. So Tim, Jane had mentioned earlier, and I wasn't quite sure what she was talking about. You might know more. She asked if we're carrying any of the new proven winner microphylla serrata crosses.
Well, I think many of we are really carrying any of the most of the hydrangea serratas that they are growing. So the biggest serratas in PW are the tough stuff ones, and we're carrying all of those. There's a new red one that's coming out in the market to replace the Tough Stuff Red. It's better plant, more compact, more floriferous. And so those are all the real serratas. Now, of course, throughout any of these plants, they're using serrata as part of their breeding. So what we are really doing is kind of taking up really a lot of those hydrangeas that they're growing and breeding out there. I don't know specifically how much serrata is in some of these, but I do know that they are definitely pushing the envelope and also eliminating some of the hydrangea that weren't good, that are not as good as the new ones. Just on the Let's Dance series, there's probably just as many plants in Let's Dance that have been discontinued than there is in the program right now. So they are doing their part to circulate out of old varieties. It's just the fact that there's just a lot that keep coming on, and I mean, we are not carrying any of the ones in Let's Dance, I think, that we started with over 10 years ago. All those varieties that we started with are gone. So they certainly are actively breeding. There's no doubt.
There's been a couple questions. I've gotten a couple emails as well, looking to have a copy of the PowerPoint as well as a video. And we'll be sending out an email at the end of the week with a link to the video. So in case you want to share this with any of your, with anybody that you want to share it with, as well as I'll set a link in there for you can actually have the PowerPoint. So if you wanted to use that information for anything else, we'll send that out at the end of the week.
All right, everybody. I haven't seen too many new questions coming in here in the last couple minutes, so thanks for your time. I really appreciate your attention span and all that. It was fun to do. So if you have any questions, certainly forward them to your sales team. We can answer all those questions as needed, and if we don't know right off, we'll make sure we get you the right answer. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next webinar a couple weeks from now.